Hello, hello, welcome to a fresh episode of Mocca with Moiz. Today's podcast is extremely important because we talk about mental health in this podcast. My guest today is a trainee therapist, currently pursuing her master's in psychology, has been working in the mental health sector for a while. Anaam Afridi. Anaam, how are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
I am well. So, Anam, before we start, just something that I want to talk to you about. In the past few weeks, we've seen, or in the past few months, we've seen an escalation in violence against women in Pakistan. We saw what happened to Noor Muqaddam. We saw what happened at the Minar Pakistan recently. And if you talk to people around you, especially women around you, they talk about this constant sense of anxiety. Every person they meet, he's a potential rapist, he's a potential murderer. And people in Pakistan have this rape anxiety because they don't know that what would take for them to be raped, what would it take for a man to kill them. So, how, as a woman in Pakistan and as someone who works in mental health, what do you think about the pressures that women in Pakistan face, and do you think that women get the help that they need?
I should have prefaced that with I'm not well, actually, instead of I'm well. So, with everything that's been happening, and you're talking about the pressures women face and how we don't know which man is going to attack, which man is a rapist. With what happened to Noor, what happened to Saima, with what happened to Kurutalen, and now the Minar Pakistan. It definitely is like living in a constant state of fear and anxiety. And just as I heard you speaking, my heart was sinking because I was like, yes, back to thinking about it. Because I think for me, the way to cope has just been thinking about it and reflecting it, and then the way to function has just been not thinking about it. And could you repeat the last part again, because I'm blanking. So, what pressures do women face?
What pressures do women face, and do they have the kind of support network? Because a lot of people who have this fear, their partners, their families are not as supportive. They don't understand this fear. So do people have the kind of help that they need?
It depends also, right? Like mental, in terms of support, if you're talking about policy-wise or politically, no. But I mean, if we talk about mental health, also to an extent, no, because mental health is it's a privilege. It's not, in Pakistan, it's been a privilege. It's not a necessity. And that's the unfortunate truth, right? Because there's a certain segment of society that even has access to mental health, considering the taboo around it, considering historically the notion of mental health in our country. So no, they don't have access to it in terms of health-wise and policy-wise. And in terms of in their personal lives, I mean, I don't speak for all women in Pakistan because, again, I do not represent the experiences of all women in Pakistan. There are women out there who can represent their experiences much better. And I also recognize the privilege in which I say that personally I've had some level of support, but it'd be much less than you think.
Yeah.
It's much less than you think.
And you spoke about taboos around mental health in Pakistan. And I think when we also spoke about Noor Muqaddam's case, the one thing that was, I mean, aside from the horrific accident itself, the one thing that's also extremely disconcerting is that it's difficult for people in Pakistan to trust mental health professionals. You're a mental health professional as well, you understand that. And we saw therapy work's role in this entire case. And the fact that they had someone working for them who was capable of something like that, who had a history of violence, who had a criminal history as well. Do you think this harms mental health professionals like you who are trying to normalize seeking help?
I wouldn't even say it harms me. It harms people who need the support, right? And who are thinking that, who are wondering if they should get support, who are wondering if this is a safe space for them to get support. It harms those people, right? It harms them more because they're in a vulnerable position and they don't know. And we try to portray it as a safe space, and it should be. And sometimes it is, and sometimes, as we've seen, it fails to be a safe space. So it harms a lot of women and a lot of minorities, gender, sexual minorities who seek help, who are vulnerable, who want to seek help but don't know where or how, right? It harms a lot of, it harms the most vulnerable in our society.
And because you've been working in the mental health sector for a while, where do you think therapy works fail? Because you understand their role, you understand the role they played, and because mental health professionals, because you're literally trusting them with your health, you subject them to a higher standard. Their actions must conform to a higher standard. So where do you think they went wrong?
So multiple levels, of course. Firstly, there is no regulatory body in Pakistan that regulates therapists.
Okay,
right?
so I'll have to cut you. So, for example, for doctors, we have the PMDC. So there's
Yes.
nothing for mental health professionals.
So there is there is something for psychology, but for psychotherapy there isn't.
Okay.
And the psychology one is also, well, yeah, it's not that active, or as PMDC is, or other institutions are. There's a lot that can be done. There needs to be a regulatory body for psychotherapists. You should, that creates a sense of accountability. As trainee therapists, when we qualify, we register ourselves with the British Association of Counselors and Psychotherapists, right? Right now we're student members, and then we'll be full-fledged members when we graduate. But they don't have any legal power or in our country. What are they going to do? They're going to say that, okay, well, your license is cancelled. But what are the repercussions of that, right? People can still get away with practicing if they're not licensed here. Who's
and
checking?
therapy works, we know that the license was suspended as well, but they continue to practice. So
yeah, so who's checking? Right? That's a huge failure, and that has to, it has to come from policy level, because we believe that, organizations should definitely hold themselves accountable. There's no doubt that they didn't do that, and they didn't hold their members accountable, and they portrayed and they're involved in deception, right? It is deception. You're deceiving the most vulnerable. At the same time, there needs to be policy action too. There needs to be an organization. There needs to be accountability. And sadly, there is none in the mental health space. And it's scary because, you have people who seek help are so vulnerable emotionally. They're pouring their hearts out to you. They're giving you an insight into their life. As a therapist, it's an immense privilege to listen and witness their stories. At the same time, it is very easy to abuse that privilege. And someone like Zahir did. He immensely abused it. Yeah. We know what happened. And there can't be any room for anything even close to that. Forget about murder, but even emotionally hurting someone. Their weaknesses, their issues, everything about them. It needs to be regulated. It's terrifying that it's not. It is absolutely terrifying that this space is not regulated in Pakistan.
And the fact that it's not regulated, there's no regulatory body, it shows the degree of importance that our policymakers give mental health.
Yeah.
Because you have regulatory bodies for virtually everything in this country, but the fact that mental health is entirely unregulated shows that nobody really cares about it.
Yeah, or they can't be bothered.
Yeah.
Or, priorities.
Yeah. And the one thing that we've spoken about mental health is, and I think there are multiple factors which are affecting our mental health these days. And the one thing that's extremely important is COVID-19. Because with everybody working at home, you don't have any outlet. You aren't meeting your friends as much. You aren't meeting your families as much. And not just adults like us. Not only are we working from homes, but for example, kids haven't gone to school in more than a year and a half. And for them, it's also more difficult to express their thoughts, express how they're feeling. So what kind of pressures do you think have been placed on people because of COVID-19? And not only are people working from home, but there's also so much uncertainty. Whether business is closing down, you're not sure if you lose your jobs. And in fact, if you speak to people our age or people who are adults, uncertainty often leads to extreme issues of mental health. So what do you think about this pandemic? And I think people often discuss the health aspects of this, the economic aspects of COVID-19, but nobody discusses the mental health aspects of this as much.
There have been discussions about it, but I guess less here. And also, I do want to point it out, Moiz, that in our country, especially, people who work from home are a very small percentage. Possibly the privileged, right? The uncertainty isn't just about working from home. It's also about, well, if you have to earn and you have to kind of you provide a necessary good, you have to go earn a buck for your family. there's uncertainty about, will you get the virus? Will you make it back? Will you give it to a family member? You know, there is not just uncertainty about working from home and the isolation, but there's also uncertainty of, well, your mortality, it's essentially. And so, I mean, COVID has really, like, and you mentioned children as well, right? Children are suffering. They're not, those who have schools that are providing for online classes, they're suffering. And the kids who don't have that provision, who don't have schools that can provide online classes, they don't have the resources or the infrastructure, they're also suffering. Adults are suffering. Working from home, they're suffering because they're isolated. There's no space, physical, emotional, there's no separation. Then people who are not, don't have the, who are actually going out physically, putting their lives at risk. So it generally has had such a immense toll on mental health. And also, if you talk about the more vulnerable women, right? Because they don't get to leave as much. When you're in lockdown, they don't get to leave. Or, I mean, women in our society already are kind of,
and men who are abusive are also at home.
Exactly, that's what I was getting at. So to men who are abusive, they have more face time with the people they're abusing. And that's like a terrifying aspect of mental health and also physical. Like it's harmful throughout.
Okay, and this other question I had, now this may come from an extreme position of privilege, but we live in a region which has had some geopolitical developments in the recent past, which have bothered people a lot. So, for example, we saw the Taliban resurgence in Afghanistan, and women, for example, human rights activists, students, young adults, they've been disconcerted about their future, and a lot of them have tried to leave the country even at the peril of their lives. Now, I, for example, have not lived through a war. I'm not sure if you have, but because we haven't, so anything we say would come from a position of privilege. But what kind of pressures do you think people in countries like that face at this time? And do you think, because throughout this conversation, we've spoken about how throughout these crises, mental health is often ignored. So do you think, or do you see that people are focusing on mental health of those who are stuck in that situation?
I think it's a lot to do with physical safety right now, right? So let's, because like you said, I haven't lived through a war, neither have you. And I want to talk about a certain aspect of it, which is like living in a state of fear and what that does to mental health. And that can be applicable to a wartime context, or it can be applicable to our society right now, where, you know, women and gender and sexual minorities are living in a state of fear, where we don't know which man is gonna snap or premeditate or harm or hurt or kill or murder. That state of fear is debilitating. It is, and I can share an example with you. I can share a personal example with you. Since Eid, when Noor's murder happened, and I know a lot of women on social media have been talking about how unsafe they feel, right? Their sense of safety has been shattered. I have personally been having nightmares. I've been waking up multiple times at night, like, I'm convinced that there's someone out there, right? And it takes a while for my husband to kind of calm me down. Like, I'm just like, no, there is someone out there. I made him go check. Like, there is someone out there, someone trying to get in. And it's just a sense of safety. Like, I stopped feeling safe in my house, let alone outside. Like, there's this general sense of, like, I feel like my body is clenched and there is no reprieve from it. There's no release. Kind of funny, kind of not. Last night, you know how your phone is connected to Bluetooth? So the speaker was in the bathroom and we were in the room, and my husband was playing a video, and I got so freaked out because it played in the bathroom, not in the room. And I was like, who's there in the bathroom? Like, what's happening? And I got really upset because he figured it out, like maybe 30 seconds before I did. And he continued with the joke, and I got so upset. And I'm like, you know the position, like, you know how unsafe, like even that noise from the bathroom that could wasn't a scary noise, it was just a noise. I'm like, there's someone there, can you check? Like even, there's just, it feels like no space is safe. And I'm not living through a war right now. I can't even imagine what it feels like to be living in that situation and having that sense of fear constantly. And it's hard to explain it because I guess you have to feel it or you have to go through it. But there's just, I ordered a pepper spray for myself. Thinking of carrying a pocket knife too. How can I make myself feel safe? I'm not sure I know how right now because I don't feel safe. Yeah, I've had people telling me that, they want to install tracking apps.
Yeah.
I have a tracking app with my family, just so we know where each other is, just in case something goes wrong, right? And I don't even know if a state of fear was this much or this heightened before, but now it is, because when you have 534 men actually, apparently, they were 534 and not 400, 534 men publicly harass and assault a woman and no one steps in, no one does anything, there's this fear that who's going to flip? When are they going to flip? What am I, it's like, how can I make myself so small that they don't flip?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been retreating and I found myself retreating. There's also this pressure. And so I know you messaged me right after Eid when everything was happening, and it took me a while to get back to you because I just had this need to retreat, right? And there's also this pressure to speak up, to use your voice, to say something, to use your position of privilege, to create a change, to do something. But there's also this very human need to just retreat and just not say anything and not do anything and just get a break from that constant state. And then just keep yourself enclosed in a safe space where you can just take a breath and relax, whether that means a closed door, a closed house with a few people that you trust. Like it's that need for the sense of safety that is so lacking right now.
And the one thing that I've been thinking about ever since this incident happened, and I'm not sure if this relates to the kind of discussion we're having right now, but the state's response when something like this happens. So for example, if you remember that incident, the motorway incident, for example, the police chief came and said that, don't travel at night. After a few other incidents, Imran Khan came and said that, dress appropriately because unless men are robots, they will harass you. So what does that do to you? Because, if the state was robust and taking action against these people, it may not, I'm not saying it won't affect you, but you may feel that you're not alone. Like every time something like this happens, somebody is with you. There's a state that's backing you. But when something like this happens, the reason why women have pepper sprays is perhaps not just because these incidents happen, but because they know that these incidents happen with impunity. There's nobody else to protect you, so you have to do what you can to protect yourself. So what do statements like those do to you as a woman and as somebody who understands, how statements like these affect mental health?
You said it right. It makes you feel utterly alone. It makes you feel like it definitely enables men and perpetrators of such violence. It gives them an out. What Trump did almost what he did in the US was enabled a lot of white supremacists.
Because when you say that, look, like
Imran Khan is enabling them.
Because
like
when Imran
Khan state's reaction, the police's reaction is enabling as opposed to trying to create change in society.
Yeah. And also because when you say that, dress appropriately, because
it's victim blaming.
And when you say that rapes would happen unless you start dressing appropriately, you're simply, you're abdicating any responsibility because you're saying that if a rape happens to you, there's not much I can do because it was your fault.
No matter what, it's your fault, whether, you can, but there was a case where someone had dug up a body. Yeah. Trigger warning, right? We constantly live through trigger warnings. Everything is a trigger warning these days, but someone had dug up a dead body to have sex with a dead body.
Yeah.
What did that dead body do? Was it not fully covered? Yeah. You don't even need a pulse anymore. Like it could be anything. It could be an animal. It could be a dead body. There have been horrific cases that you hear about every single day. And it's not limited to just women. It's limited to children. I mean, it includes children, it includes gender minorities, and it includes dead bodies, it includes animals, it includes anyone who is vulnerable, anyone who's weak, anyone who doesn't have their support. And when the state or whoever is in power and has that power says that, well, you're on your own, it's like, well, now what, right? And again, the state of fear is heightened. No one's going to look out for me if I get screwed. If I'm in a situation, if I put myself in a vulnerable situation, I'm screwed. There is nothing. And again, like from a position of privilege, maybe I can take care of myself. But there are countless women who are in public spaces, who have to put themselves in positions where they are so vulnerable and no one is looking out for them. There's nobody looking out for them, for their safety, for anything. And again, like that is terrifying. We live in terrifying times. And it's almost hopeless because it's like, what do you do? There are women who are in their 60s who have said that when they go to a supermarket, men's gaze, the gaze, it pierces, like it's just, and they say, well, you know, we're older and we feel that way. Wonder what when you're younger, you feel that way. Because it's not about the age, it's not about the clothes, it's not about, you can be covered head to toe, you'll still be harassed, you'll still be groped, you'll still be subjected to violence of multiple kinds.
And for me, one of the worst things that happened after these incidents is that you had these conversations that men dominated. Like you would hear men say that, nahi agar ye karti to ye na hota, to uske ghar raat 10 baje kyun gayi thi? And there was this Twitter space, I think last night, where there was a conversation about understanding feminism hosted by two men. And all these, middle-aged uncles were telling people about what feminism is. And there was this girl who was trying to tell these middle-aged men that, what he was saying is completely, it does not make any sense. And this host, the guy who was hosting this conversation on feminism, said that, oh, you're bossy, I like that. So it's weird that you have all these incidents and then you have men telling women that this is like how you should act.
Yeah.
This
is how you should act, and then we won't act that way. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? It's also one of those things, like if women are, if men are labeled assertive, and if men are assertive, it's, oh, they're such a good leader. Yeah. Wow, you're such a good leader. If women are assertive, oh, you're bossy.
Yeah. Difficult to work with.
You're difficult. Yeah, you're not a team player, and it's just, there's such double standards that exist globally, and. The sad thing is, like, I know our whole conversation has been pretty dark and not hopeful, but that's the truth. Like, I don't know. And I know there's so many women working towards making the society better. And I want to thank them all for it, because it takes immense strength and immense courage in our society to speak up after being constantly told that, no, I know your experience better than you know your experience. And it's so frustrating. And for someone like me, I personally feel hopeless sometimes, but then I look at all the women speaking out and all the women marching, and, not just women, but minorities, gender, sexual minorities marching and trying to create semblance of change in the society. And I think that's the only thing that gives me hope.
And now moving on to, like, we've had this conversation about women, about how they feel, about the sense of fear. Now, talking more about your experience as a mental health professional, because mental health in Pakistan is still a taboo, I think it's, for many people to pursue mental health as a profession is also difficult, because there are people telling you that because there's only a niche that needs mental health or that actually has the resources to seek help, you shouldn't be pursuing this as a career. So what was your motivation for pursuing mental health? Because we were having this conversation and you told me that this is not what you had initially planned for yourself. So what made you change? And were the people who, sort of discouraged you?
Well, it even discouraged me. I think what made me pursue it was something very personal. Like I mentioned, I was writing and I was in the middle, like I had, I've been wanting to write a novel, and I had all my scenes planned out and like the plot. And then when I got down to writing the characters, and they were based on, family members and people from my childhood, I couldn't write it because it felt too heavy. And that's when I saw therapy. And so it's interesting because I didn't go in with what I got out of it. So I went in, I was like, I can't write, and it's heavy, and I'm feeling demotivated, and a lot of stuff that came up was very personal. I understood more about my mother's mental health. It brought a lot of clarity to childhood experiences, and it made me feel better. It made me feel relieved that, okay, my experience is valid. And the reason I switched was, and I'd been thinking about it for a few months, and I kind of sprung it on my therapist, like, I want to do what you do. And she's just like, have you thought about it? And I was like, I've been thinking about it for many months. And the reason was like, I just want to make one person kind of feel better in the way that you have made me feel better. And that will be enough for me. Yeah, I think that's why I pursued mental health. It's a challenge because, like you said, it's not that, for me personally, I was very grateful that I didn't have any discouragement. But I can understand that, I can understand that there are so many taboos around for people pursuing it. It's hard. It's a huge financial cost to also become a therapist. You for 2 years, you see clients, you cover costs, fees, and everything on top of that. For people who are seeking it, interestingly, we as trainee therapists are not allowed to charge. We're only allowed to charge to cover costs. Sessions are online, so we don't charge. We only charge 50 to 100 rupees. The point of it is to make mental health accessible, right? But it's online, so it's really not accessible to everyone except those who have like a space and working internet connection. So personally, I've really enjoyed it, and it's been such a privilege to be in this field that I still want to write my novel, but I can't imagine leaving the mental health space now.
And before we part, because you spoke about, especially people who are older than us, they've never been able to understand that they're suffering from mental health issues, let alone seek help. So what would you like to say to them about how it's okay to seek help and how it doesn't mean that, because, especially for people who are older than us, like the previous generation, when you ask them to seek mental health, they say, we're not crazy, so we shouldn't have to seek help. So is there something that you would like to tell them?
I can tell them what worked for me and a family member who's older is just, it doesn't mean you're crazy, it's just a chemical imbalance. And that's a very reductive way of looking at mental health, but I find that it works for the older generation. It's a chemical imbalance. You may just need talk therapy is one way. You may need to see a psychiatrist to fix that chemical imbalance, and talk therapy is a way to kind of ensure that it's kind of maintained or regularized. I think the phrase chemical imbalance works wonders for the older generation, at least in my experience.
Thank you so much for your time, Anaam. This was a pleasure, and I hope that people who watch this, I hope this normalizes seeking help for them, and I hope that this episode helps you. Until next time, see you later.